who will make it right? Who's going to make everything all right? That's really the question the angel is asking. Who's going to be able to take the decrees of God, to operate within the power of God to make things turn out all right? What the seven churches are wondering. They're the victims of persecution. They're on the outside of their community. They can't participate fully in all that is. They want to know, who's going to make it right? How are we going to get it to be right? And there are all kinds of ways in which we wonder that. What do you think needs to be right? I mean, in your own life. Or you can be magnanimous and look into the world around us. What needs to be made right? Back pain is the one on my mind at the moment. Okay, so back pain, who's going to make it right? Well, we got surgeons who have one idea. We have another kind of doctor that injects you with an epidural. That's another idea. We have acupuncturists. We have, nutritionists. We have a chiropractor. And we have a rolfer and a massage therapist. I mean, there are all kinds of people. Who's going to make it right? That's what we're looking for. And, when something goes wrong in this world or in the church, what we tend to do? We tend to look for somebody to make it right. So what we usually do is pass a new law. That's not to say all laws are bad. I'm just saying that we look to make it right. We want somebody to get that idea. We want somebody to take the decrees of God and make things right. Barbara and I watched a movie on Friday night called Lions and Lambs. Maybe you've seen it. It's relatively recent, I guess. It's really three stories that operate at the same time. They're related, but they're very different. There are two soldiers in Afghanistan so that they can, part of a winter thaws, be able to have the high ground and control the war. But it didn't work out too well, and the helicopter that brought them there had been shot up. And these two fell out of the helicopter, and there they are on top of the mountain as the enemy begins to come towards them. There's another story. We move to a senator's office. This is an up-and-coming senator. You can picture Tom Cruise, dressed up really well. Who it was. Up-and-coming senator, and he's got a lot of power. He's got the president's ear, and he's excited because this new foray, this new strategy, is going to be able to make everything all right. And he's looking for support. He wants this new strategy of putting these people on the tops of mountains to work, because otherwise, how is he going to maintain his power? And so he invites a older and wiser newspaper reporter or television reporter to come and be with him, and he tries to sell her on the idea that this new strategy, it's the real story. It's the new thing. And she's thinking, well, okay, maybe you think that's the way to make everything right, but you also told us that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, and so I'm doubting it. I think maybe if we dig really hard, we'll be able to find the truth, and the truth will make everything all right. Who's going to make it right? We shift to another scene where there's a professor at a university in California. Looks suspiciously like Santa Barbara to me, but I don't know. And this professor, it was Robert Redford, who, by the way, directed the movie. You've got the political lean of this thing? So it was Robert Redford, and he had called a student in who was, kind of one of those students who was just throwing away his life. It was just, he didn't go to class, and he wandered around, and he really didn't care about much. He was a bit cynical, because when he looked at the world, he thought, well, what's the point? And Robert Redford was trying to instill a little responsibility into him, trying to let him know that he had possibility, that right now he could make a choice to make a difference in the world, to make things right. And a little twist in this story, you see, he'd had the same conversation with the two soldiers who were now on top of the mountain in Afghanistan. He'd encouraged them to take a stand and make things right. They were living it out in a way that didn't make him very happy. Nevertheless, he respected their ability to take that stand, but who's going to make it right? The young man who decides to do something, the senator who exerts force and power, the person looking for truth, the soldiers on the mountain. Who's going to make it right? I wept when there was no one in heaven or on earth or in the seas that could make it right. I wept. But we keep hoping. Have you noticed that? We just don't seem to be able to stop hoping that there is some power out there that is going to make things right. Right before I went into 8:30 worship, Nancy Weems and I were praying with John and William, and she said, yeah, where is that fix-it God anyway? We could use some of that fix-it God. We could use that God up there making things happen. We can't seem to get it out of our imagination that maybe that God doesn't exist. Oh, we've come to some conclusions that there's not a puppeteer up there. We understand that. The God we don't believe in doesn't exist, but nevertheless, we keep reaching for a God like that that will make things right, one that is powerful, the lion, you see. We're looking for something that'll make it right. And the trouble is the church, of course, has very often supported this effort. We need to be looking for this powerful God that makes things right. In fact, it seems to be embedded in something we call the doctrine of the Trinity. Now, one of the things you're going to have to suffer through over the next couple of months is I'm going to talk about the Trinity because I've been reading a lot about the Trinity. And believe it or not, I think it's interesting and valuable. But we've had this doctrine of the Trinity in our heads, and you know basically what it is the people who were developing felt that they'd experienced God in three ways. They experienced God as the Father Creator, as the one who is the source, as the mystery, the one that's translucent and has fire inside. You know, they experienced God that way. They also experienced God's Son, that is to say, the incarnation, the presence of God with us. Right? And they also experienced the Spirit, the presence of God that continued to be imbued in us, in which we live and move and have our being, okay? And so they were trying to make sense of this. And they began to talk, okay, so it's one God, but it's, we got these three things, and so what's the deal? And they came up with a very complicated formula. It's one God, and there are three persons, 1, 2, 3. But each one of those persons is actually the whole God. Now, I know it doesn't make sense, but would you trust a definition of God that made perfect sense? So that's what they worked with. They got this God, and this God has its being, and it's doing what they call the perichoresis, this dance among itself, this wholeness, this complete unity. Right? And there it is on the outside. But it's powerful. Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, blessed Trinity. Sound familiar? We're going to sing it at the end of worship. All right? This is a powerful God. This is the Lion of Judah in our hearts, the one who can make things right. But here's the trouble. In this text, he heard about a lion. But what showed up was a lamb, and the lamb was slain. Maybe not the kind of lion we had in mind. Maybe not the kind of power and fixing that we had in mind. The interesting thing about the Trinity, we've taken it and we put it out there, and we imagine there's this God out there that does stuff that will somehow be able to fix it, and yet that God expresses God's power as a slain lamb. For 2,000 years, we have known that. We've described it in our doctrine of the Trinity, but for 2,000 years, we have nevertheless kept asking for the God that's going to fix things, the Lion of Judah. Now, there's a problem with this business of the lamb, the slain lamb. You've heard me, make fun of magic blood. I've been struggling with this for months.